What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Floyd Street's Finest, presented by Great Flood Brewing Company. I am your host, Jeff Greer, thrilled to be back here with you. And we have a very special, semi-regular guest joining us today. It is one Mike Rutherford, aka Card Chronicle. We're going to take a temperature on the state of the union for the state of the cards, I suppose we should say, of the Louisville men's basketball program, and just get Mike's general thoughts on how he thinks things are going, as my dog Lily snorts just off camera into the microphone. So I appreciate that from my gal. You might see her tail wagging on our video as well. This is not her first appearance, and it won't be her last. Excited to have Mike on the podcast this week. Lots to talk about. The recruiting evaluation period in July, where things are particularly frenetic, is over. We are now in sort of the awkward no man's land for the next few days as players start to get ready to take their visits into August and starting into the school year. Of course, for Louisville, bunch of players starting to make those decisions, and we'll see when or if DJ Wagner visits. I think that's something everybody expects. AJ Johnson has already said that he would like to visit for Louisville Live, which we do not have a date for yet, I don't believe. Aaron Bradshaw has already visited, and then there's a number of other guys on the list who are contemplating visits or have already scheduled them. Curtis Williams, a wing from the Detroit area, will be visiting in September as well. So some names to start paying attention to, and a reminder as usual to make sure that you are subscribed to the Field of 68 across the board. Great college basketball podcasts, churning them out through the summer. There's no shortage of content anywhere that you want to listen to it, either on YouTube. Obviously, you can find it wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow them on social media across the board as well, Instagram, Twitter, etc., etc. It's always good stuff on the Field of 68. And if you are a Louisville fan or someone who just wants to read about Louisville for whatever your reasons might be, please give me a shout and go find jeffgreer.substack.com. If you follow me on Twitter at Jeff Greer, I tweet the link out every Thursday and then tend to reshare it into the weekend. It's a weekly newsletter. Try to cover a lot of different bases while homing in on a few different important topics, or one topic each week to analyze and discuss about Louisville basketball. And we are still going strong. Comes out every Thursday, hits your inbox in the morning, 5 a.m. typically, unless something crazy has happened, that's really it. So something crazy has to have happened for you to not get my newsletter at 5 a.m. on a Thursday. So sign up for that as well. Really excited to have Mike Rutherford on the podcast. But before we get to that conversation, let me tell you a little bit about my friends over at Great Flood Brewing Company. What a difference a few months can make. Come have a beer, bourbon, or glass of wine at Great Flood. Those options that we talked about for months have expanded. It's time to hit it and get going. As the weather warms up here in July, it's brutally hot. Walk on up and enjoy our patio and friendly staff as we welcome what will be one of the most exciting off seasons for Louisville football and basketball. We are proud sponsors and cannot wait to serve you. So thank you to our friends over at Great Flood Brewing. And without any further ado, here's my conversation with my pal, Mike Rutherford. All right, we are now joined by the legend himself, Mike Rutherford, at least in his own mind. Mike, what's going on, man? How are you, buddy?
Hanging in there, man. Can I ask, legend in my own mind? First of all, I love that. Very true. Also, why did my Zoom invite say Bruce Greer?
Okay, first, speaking of legends, that is my dad.
Okay.
And I just realized that I am in his Zoom instead of mine. I switched between the accounts. Mine is the free one. His is the premium one.
Oh.
So I'm basically a trust fund baby because my dad has professional Zoom.
Bruce doesn't skimp. Bruce
doesn't skimp.
He's not afraid to live a life of luxury. We know that about him. So I enjoy seeing it's like Bruce
five-star dad.
Bruce Greer's room is ready for you. I was like, okay, let's do this, Bruce. Let's go.
That would be a much better Zoom than you having to talk to me. That guy, I hope you also enjoyed that the subject line was baby that zooms, zoom, zoom, zoom.
I
To
was
the
going to
tune of
look over that.
Cisco.
I
Yeah.
was going to gloss over that fact. The Bruce Greer part was way more funny to me. I enjoyed
Oh,
it.
fair enough. Fair enough. Well, he is a 72-year-old man who is obsessed with the voice and like trains. So he and Glenn have that in common with the train love. Um, well, Mike, I feel like we try to do this like every maybe like 4 months because I think I certainly enjoy having you on the show, and um, it's a weird time because I think there's sort of this. It's been like a month of just pure like combinations of panic with speculation with jubilation at certain points with Louisville fans, and almost none of it was based on anything really concrete. But I guess that's the product of the recruiting situations across the board and just the recruiting world in general. What would you say? I guess we'll start here. Is the state of the union for the Louisville basketball fan?
Well, when you said like the roller coaster of emotions and all that, which is totally true. I thought you were just talking about the DJ Wagner recruitment. Like I thought that was going to be the lead in right there, but I guess it does sort of.
Aaron Bradshaw too. I mean, it's everybody.
That recruitment is kind of a microcosm of what it's been like to be a Louisville fan these last few months. And I mean, the state of the union is the fan base is kind of where they've been more times than not, basically since Rick Pitino left, which is a million different places. I think you've got there was that brief glorious period where in the 2 weeks like after Kenny Payne got officially announced as the new head coach, it seemed like everybody was kind of on the same page. Even people who were maybe, I won't say anti Kenny Payne, but who were skeptical of the hire, who maybe wanted this guy or that guy above Kenny Payne, they were won over by the introductory press conference, the message that he is delivering consistently, the hirings of Nolan Smith, the hirings of Danny Manning, kind of him giving his philosophy about recruiting and all that stuff. Everybody was on the same page. And then you have some perceived, whether they were or not, swings and misses at in the transfer portal. You had maybe some things that were looking like surefire deals in the 2023 recruiting class, not looking like surefire deals. And now I think you have a segment of the fan base, and you wrote about this in a couple of newsletters ago, and I hate to give you credit, but I thought you did a really good job about the sort of the dangers of flying by the seat of your pants with this whole trust in KP mentality, because that's the response to everything right now. If you have a legitimate concern about the upcoming roster, if you have a legitimate concern about maybe the way that some things are trending with the 2023 recruiting class, you're going to be met swiftly with a whole bunch of KP's got this, KP knows what he's doing, you just have to trust him. And even if you are kind of, I don't know, leery right now of some things that are going on, you really have no other choice but then to say, like, we just have to hope that this is the guy. The roster doesn't look the way that I think Louisville fans thought it was going to, even as recently as just a couple of months ago. And, DJ Wagner does not look like a sure thing, far from it for Louisville. You mentioned Aaron Bradshaw, same kind of deal there. Some of the other guys that we thought we were in on looking like, maybe a little bit dicey. And so with all this, all you can say is we just got to be patient. Just got to trust KP. Maybe this team can overachieve despite the perceived limitations of the roster. Maybe he's going to just kill it with the 2023 class, even if it's not with Wagner. We're all just sort of in a wait and see type position. And look, nobody wants to be there at any point in the calendar, let alone July, where there's nothing else to talk about. And so I think you've gotten just people reacting to every little detail and kind of blowing it up. And that's not really fair to anybody. I think it's equally unfair to do the whole thing that some people were doing 3 months ago, which I think played a big part in leading Louisville fans where they are today, which was, Kenny Payne's going to get guys. Like, he's going to turn this thing around lightning quick. We're going to be second weekend good in year one. We're going to, and now a lot of those same guys are saying the roster's fine. We didn't need to add some guys. And like, I kind of want to be like, you guys kind of did this. Like, you set the bar unreasonably high. And now I think we're in a position where maybe people who have only been paying attention to this in their periphery, who don't follow the ins and the outs of recruiting and all this stuff, are just going to go into next season expecting like a Sweet 16 team, and they're going to be wildly disappointed if that doesn't happen. And I kind of hate that for Kenny Payne, because I don't think it's fair to judge him on his first roster. I think you need to judge him. I think you can start judging him depending on what the IRP does in his second season. I think it's only fair. He got a late start. I mean, he basically had no chance to recruit the 2022 class. There are explainable reasons to why the transfer portal didn't go as well as some people were hoping it would go. And like the roster is just not going to look, hopefully, like the way his future rosters are going to look like it will.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's the same both with recruiting, but and with the transfer portal as well, as big names. They were attached to the Malachi Smiths, to briefly like Kendrick Davis, like all these different guys. Like they would get their name. You'd say, oh well, Louisville's got this opportunity to be a key guard for them, a lead guard, and I don't know where the smoke came from with all of that stuff, of where it was, oh, Louisville's the favorite with this place. I know I certainly ran into that. Like, I mean, I was under the impression for a while that Imani Bates and Malachi Smith were both going to go to Louisville. That's what people kept telling me. People who have been pretty spot on with a lot of other stuff. And then all of a sudden it just kind of just kept going and going and going. And then, okay, actually, no, they're not. Leans. And, I think you're right. Like I picked Louisville to finish 10th in the ACC in my Lindy's preview. And honestly, you could have convinced me to pick them 12th. You could have convinced me to pick them like 8th, 7th or 8th in the league, because I do think, and I know you've probably looked at it too, like outside of the top 4, and maybe you could throw Florida State, Virginia Tech, and Notre Dame, I guess, maybe as that second tier behind the top 4. There's a lot of uncertainty. So, in theory, and this goes on to this touches on why people were excited about Kenny Payne, and I think they should be in this regard. The development side, the player relationships, the ability to coach young players, especially big guys, when you've got Kenny Payne and Danny Manning on your staff, and Nolan Smith coaching guards with his experience, the hope would be, look, they had a rough season last year. They brought 6 of those guys back, but those guys are going to get different coaching now. And maybe we'll see them tap into the potential that they have. And if that's the case, then they suddenly become a team that looks more like a fringe tournament team or a tournament team versus like a middle back end of the middle pack of the ACC. But that requires you to just believe that everything will go to plan and these guys will get better and they won't have any injuries. They won't have to deal with anything like that. And I don't blame a single Louisville fan if they struggle believing. Like, I do not blame a single Louisville fan for anything that they feel based on the last 7 years. It's just been really difficult, I think, for people around here to consistently have gotten their hopes up for a few different things over the years, only to have them dashed or just kind of assume that everything is going to be worse or get worse before it gets better. So it was almost that setup to build the excitement around it that comes with any new hire, that the disconnect is where it's like, this is exciting. And I understand why, connects to the history. We know all the reasons why Kenny Payne's hiring was exciting. You can just do that. You don't have to also say and also this army of 5-star recruits and the best transfers in the country are all going to come to Louisville, and Jay-Z's going to start coming to games. And it just got to that level. Yeah. And you're really, that is a high wire act to have to walk on. And quite frankly, none of it's from the actual staff.
Right.
None of it's from them themselves. And that could be the next place we go, Mike. Do you think the kind of zipped up, not really even really leaking anything, policy, I guess, or approach to the way they do things, how long can you go before that? I don't want to say blows up in your face, because the guy's been the coach for 4 months, but how long can you go before that starts to push the boundaries of what fans will accept?
You can go until you start losing at too high of a quantity. I think that because right now you can do the whole, because he's so quiet, because things are so close to the vest, you can do the don't worry about it, he's got it. Mm-hmm. And that lasts as long as the program is doing the perceived right things or is taking the perceived steps in the right direction. If he comes out, regardless of what the roster looks like this year, let's say the team comes out in November, they drop a game to a team that they shouldn't, maybe they go 0-3 in Maui and look kind of woeful doing it, then I think all of a sudden everybody starts questioning, like, is he being quiet because he's playing things so close to the vest, he's got a secret plan, or is he being quiet because he doesn't know what he's doing? And I think that's when the questions start being asked. And I don't think that'll be fair. I mean, I've been saying basically since he got hired, I was saying, I'm not going to judge Kenny Payne off his first season. I think you can look at certain things here and there. You can look at the, how he coaches in close games, late game situations, all that good stuff, how he likes to use timeouts, whether the style's working or not. But this roster is, like I said earlier, it's not going to look the way that hopefully it will moving forward. Now, there was a brief period like you were talking about when, all of a sudden Tyrese Hunter has Louisville on his short list. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe we will be able to judge this guy in year one. Like if you have Tyrese Hunter, a couple other guys, all of a sudden that looks like a roster that you can talk people in to being like a top 25 caliber roster, but it didn't play out that way. And here we are. I think you have to understand the only guy he was able to get in the 2022 class was Devin Ree. And that was only because, Will Wade got fired from LSU finally at the 11th hour, and he was freed up. Now, I do think you have to give Kenny Payne credit for keeping Kamari Lands. I know that's not the guy that he recruited. It's not a guy that he initially signed, but he kept him in the fold. Like Kamari Lands would have had options had he chosen to ask out of his letter of intent. He could have gone other places. Kenny Payne kept him, and then he gets one, I think, pretty high-profile or regular transfer in Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, who I think can have a fantastic sophomore season at Louisville. But outside of that, you've got, and I said this on the radio show, if you're a Louisville fan who is prone to being maybe overly sensitive about the way that national people talk about you, you're going to have to, the skin's going to have to get pretty thick once October rolls around, because the previews are going to come out. They're not going to be kind to Louisville. You've got, I mean, you mentioned your Lindy's power rankings. You're looking at that objectively. If you are an objective national writer, you're going to look at this roster and say, well, they brought back 6 guys from a team that was maybe the worst Louisville team of my lifetime, a team that won 13 games. They added Kamari Lands, who I think is going to be a fantastic college player, but who is not viewed as like a transcendent one-and-done type talent. Mm-hmm. Devin Ree, who was like around number 80-ish, back end of the top 100 in most recruiting rankings. And then Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, who I think has all the potential in the world, but put up pedestrian stats in his 1 year at Tennessee. If you're an objective national writer trying to be taken seriously, you look at that roster and you can't say that they're going to be a top tier team in the ACC. Now, if you're a Louisville fan, you look at it and you say some of the things that you were saying. 6 guys came back from last year's team that was not good, but they all showed flashes in their own way, at least the ones who played. Not Mike James. We didn't see him. We barely saw much of some of the other guys, but they showed flashes. And we now know that this was a wildly dysfunctional season. You have to hope that with the a stable coaching situation, hopefully better coaches at individual instruction, and know, like, is this guy the head coach? Is this guy the head coach? Is that guy the head coach? Are other guys fighting over food in the locker room after games? None of that stuff. If you clear all that out, you have to hope that all of those guys are going to be markedly better and that the newcomers are going to be healthy contributors. And if all that happens, then yeah, you're looking at a team that could, I don't know, flirt with 20 wins, maybe flirt with an NCAA tournament. I think you have to hope, to put it in a recent like comparison for Louisville fans, you have to hope this is a 2019 Louisville football situation where the 2018 team was abysmal. I mean, gave up 50 points or more in their last 5 games. And the big question that offseason was, were they just that bad, or was there enough talent there that they should have been way better and Bobby Petrino just quit? And I think we found out in Scott Satterfield's first season that there was way too much talent for that team to have gone 2-10. And Satterfield, as a result, was able to win 8 games and was ACC Coach of the Year. And a lot of the guys that just looked like they didn't want to be there the year before became all conference caliber players. You have to hope that that same thing happens with this year's basketball team. But the predictions are going to come in. They're going to be unkind. When the ACC media poll comes out, like, Louisville fans, prepare yourself. You're probably going to be in the bottom half of the conference. You're going to be 9th or below. And that's the way that most rankings are going to be. And I think if you're Louisville, if you're a Louisville fan, you just have to hope that all these people aren't seeing things as closely as you are, and that you're not just looking at things through ultra rose-colored glasses.
Yeah. I mean, outside of maybe Georgia Tech, which the roster I don't know about. Front court looks very not great. And then Clemson having to deal with PJ Hall possibly being out for a while. After that, I mean, I would listen to arguments that BC it has a better roster or has a reason to believe that they could be placed ahead of Louisville. You could listen to someone say that about Pitt. You could hear arguments for a few teams that would kind of surprise you, I think, just by the name of the program and where those programs have been. But certainly, again, from the objective outside looking in standpoint, you see 2.5 starters from last season, maybe 3 from a really bad dysfunctional team. And yeah, you're grasping for straws. Mike, something that I thought was really interesting was a conversation that I had in the aftermath of the season back in the spring. And obviously I'm not going to get into who told me this or how it was conveyed to me. But basically, just generally speaking, there were people who worked on the staff who I think if the timing was right, if the feel was a little bit better, maybe they would have been retained in some role on the staff. But the consensus was for the adults, and I'm not saying the players are children; they're obviously young men, but the older folks around, the people who are the professionals, that having any of them really around would, at any point, if anything goes wrong with this new staff, might trigger going back to the bad place, going back to that's how bad things were. Now, I'm not saying that would happen for sure, but that just should give you a small window into just how bad it got. And you mentioned, fights over food and not knowing who really was in charge of things. I mean, there was a lot going on. So they've got to just kind of just chuck that in the bin and move on and be totally bought in on this new coaching staff. And I think that part should be where Kenny Payne and his assistants shine, because you keep hearing about relationships. We're already starting to see recruits talk about how much they enjoy talking to him and what their conversations are like. Aaron Bradshaw talking about how Kenny Payne talks so much more about life in general and life after basketball and not so much just about basketball. And look, there's a lot of quotes out there from recruits every year. It's generally the same stuff, but that kind of stuff catches your eye. I mean, the relationship building stuff catches your eye. And you have to think that maybe, with some time and a chance to learn from people who look at the game differently, that those guys can maybe prosper. A guy like Jalen Withers, I feel like is maybe stands to benefit the most out of this coaching change, maybe a JJ Trainer as well. But just to have a different voice trying to coach you through your potential. I'm eager to see what those two guys in particular look like. And then obviously Mike James getting the chance to come back and be healthy. I'll ask you this, and then we'll talk a little bit about recruiting. Give me like 3 things, and I realize I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but give me like 3 things. So like these 3 things go well for Louisville with this roster. And they are, I think the ceiling is just contending to get into the NCAA tournament. I don't want to be too harsh, but I don't want to give you a ceiling that's like Final Four. But what are 3 things that you think would need to go right for them to nudge that ceiling of being a tournament team?
One, someone who's not technically listed as a guard steps up and helps out as a secondary ball handler / primary ball handler when LLS needs a break. And I know people are sick of talking about this. I know people are sick of hearing about the one guard. We have every single day on the radio show on the text line, there's 50 people who are like, any guards coming soon? Got any guards? What's up with the guards? And I get but it is you can't say it's not a valid concern. Because LLS last year certainly had flashes, but he was at his best when it was kind of in the game's a little bit out of reach. I can go one-on-one and just try to be a score first guard. Michigan State, the North Carolina game when Louisville was trailing and he came back. That was when he was at his best last year. he didn't all that often look like a true point guard, if we're just being honest about it, because he wasn't asked to be. He wasn't playing. Jared West was mostly dominating the ball. He was playing off it. But I'm not saying he can't do it, but that's if he can't handle the point guard duties, like Louisville's, they're screwed at that point. There's no other guy that you look at and say, well, he could do it. We have to hope that Kamari Lands or Mike James, ideally both, can be not only a capable two who can take some of the ball handling duties off the shoulders of Ellis, but who, when Ellis needs a break, can slide over and play that position effectively. If not, you're asking a whole lot of like Hersey Miller, who's doesn't want to be referred to as Masterpiece Son. He's going to have to, if he plays well enough this year that he's like a great backup point guard, we will stop talking about Master P. It'll be all about Hersey. You're asking a lot for a guy who played limited minutes at Tennessee Tech last year. Was it Tennessee Tech or Tennessee State?
I think it was Tennessee State.
I think you're right. I think it was Tennessee State. But the fact that we can't name that off the top of our heads is not a great sign for that. But if he is able, then that obviously takes the load off of L. Ellis's shoulders and the other two guys that I just mentioned. But that's one. You've got to find a secondary ball handler. And I think if you want to tie that into like a 1A and 1B, L. Ellis has to be like a all ACC caliber point guard, or else you're just like whatever offense Kenny Payne's going to run is not going to work. Two, I think I'll go to a guy that I just talked about there. Like I know that we mentioned Kenny Payne playing things so close to the vest. Like I don't get a whole lot of info out of U of L these days. It's very tight-lipped around there. The one thing that I have heard fairly consistently since the summer started is that believe the Kamari Land type. Like buy stock now. Like this kid he looked great coming out of high school. He looks like he's the real deal right now. I think I'm not saying he has to be a one and done player for Louisville to be NCAA tournament good, but he has to be about at that level. A guy that like midway through the year, people are talking about, could he be ACC freshman of the year? Could he be potentially like a one and done type guy? I think he has to be not outrageously good is setting the bar too high, but I think he needs to be very, very, very good for Louisville to be better than a lot of people think they're going to be. And then three, I think finding the right mix in the post. Like we know that there are a ton of front court players in this roster that all seem to have like a lot of different skill sets, but which ones can play together effectively? Because you're going to have to play two of these guys. Like, can Huntley Hatfield and Sidney Curry play the 5 and the 4 effectively together? Can, what's Roosevelt Wheeler's role going to be? Is JJ Traynor going to be more of a 3, or do they let him play the 4? Jalen Withers, I think you and I both think he could have, you forget how good he was at times as a freshman. He averaged double figures on a team that was much better than the team that he played for last year when he was barely putting up any numbers. And he showed flashes of his potential late in last season. But are you going to try to use him at the 3? Are you going to try to move him back to the 4? Like how's that going to work? And I don't think that that's something you can necessarily figure out during the summer months. It may take those games in November and December to kind of mix and match lineups to figure out what the best rotation is. But if you can find the right combination out of those, I think 5 very, very talented post players, then you might be able to have something. I think those would be the 3 things. There are like 15 things we could talk about, but those would be the 3 biggest.
Yeah. I agree with all that. I would throw in health, but I feel like that's kind of just the obvious, like overarching shouldn't count as one. But if you sustain an injury, and I'm knocking on wood, I wouldn't wish this on anybody. But a Sid Curry or a Huntley Hatfield or a Withers, you feel like, okay, that sucks, but you still have some other options in those spots. At guard, it is very thin. Now, if Fabio Basili does end up coming to Louisville, which is still by all indications what the plan is, that he will eventually be able to have everything in order to be able to enroll, he's kind of in the similar vein as Hersey Miller, where you just don't know anything about him. Don't know if he's capable of being a backup point guard in the ACC. Don't know. But at this point, with the roster constructed as it is, you say, look, L. Ellis needs to play Terry Rozier 15 minutes, play like 35 minutes a game, and just stay healthy. And that's a guy who gets knocked to the floor a lot, who runs into traffic, who is not afraid of contact. So you've got to do a really good job of managing him, because he is a Porsche, but Porsches can get driving pretty quickly and get knocked off their path. And you just have to figure out a way to keep him upright because you weren't able to find other options to help him out. I am super excited for Mike James. I'm really excited for him. I watched them practice a few times in the preseason last year. I was at the practice when he got hurt. Second year in a row now that I have been at a U of L practice, and a player got hurt for the year.
Keep him away.
Yeah, I feel
keep
awful.
This man away.
I feel awful. It's a bad touch, it's a bad omen, but I'll never forget the practice that he was hurt in when he got hurt with his Achilles. For the first hour, you ever watch like guys practicing or playing against each other in like 1v1 situation? It doesn't have to be just one-on-one literally, but guarding each other in 5-on-5, guarding each other in drills. And you're like, I think that, like, from my vantage point, I would be concerned that they are going to get into a fist fight. But from a college basketball at a very high level standpoint, they were absolutely competing. And then when the drills were over, they would like help each other up, and like it was fine. But I mean, while they were playing, they were like, they were absolutely fighting each other. And that was Dre Davis and Mike James. I mean, it was really fun to watch, because we know that Dre Davis is a super tough kid. And Mike James was getting rebounds in traffic among the big guys. He was scoring around the rim. He was knocking down shots outside. So I really think that there's great potential there for him. But in the same vein as what people are hoping for with the guys who played last year, you're hoping that someone who has not played in basically a year, or hadn't played in about 8 months, and is coming off of a very serious injury, can somehow tap back into what he was before the injury and trust his body enough to be able to get him through a full season and not overcompensate in other muscle groupings or anything like that. So I'm very excited to see him play. I just hope that he can stay healthy. But Mike, I will tell you this: Kamari Lands, I've got him circled in my ACC fantasy basketball draft that's coming up in a few months. I think I have Sid Curry on my roster. I'm going to keep him. It's a keeper league, and I think Kamari Lands is going to be my other U of L guy who I go after.
Wouldn't be a Rutherford Greer podcast if you hadn't brought up your nerd ACC league. There you go.
You're just jealous you're not in the league. You're jealous you're not in the league. You would love that league.
I'm 100%
love that league.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Scouring the ranks of the Boston College bench to find guys to get me stats.
Look, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
It's truly, it's absolutely my wheelhouse. This is like a very small wheelhouse, but it is a wheelhouse. Well, Mike, I'm intrigued. Let's talk a little bit about recruiting. And obviously, I know you and I are in a unique position where we know people who know what's going on, or at least have an inkling of what's going on. You and I are not prowling the sidelines at Peach Jam and places like that. At least this year, I have been before, but obviously have not in a couple of years. Where do you think Louisville is? Like, what's your overarching vibe check on the Louisville recruiting class for 2023?
Yeah, I think well, first of all, with the people keep asking about the Fabio Basili thing. Is it Fabio or Fabio? Have we come to a conclusion there? Because I just say Fabio, and
I'll tell you this, Mike. By the way, we're recording this well, and absolutely,
I know thunder
and lightning storm is outside. Honeymoon Greer, Fabio. Greer, Louisville Greer, who's been back here for 3 years now. Fabio.
Oh man, I'm choosing to go with Fabio. I think that's what we can go with. But yeah, my understanding is kind of what you were saying there, is that as long as his transcript, which was relayed to me as being, quote, a mess, as long as that can somehow get worked out, the plan is for him to join this year's team. But there's still, to my knowledge, a little bit of concern that that's going to happen. We'll see how that all plays out. Because the secondary question is, if that can't get worked out for him to reclassify, do they even go after him in 2023? And they seem to be focused on maybe more of a higher caliber player. So I'm not sure how that would work out, but we'll see about that. The 2023 class, I think it's interesting because, everybody knows the big names. And for so long, Kenny Payne played everything else kind of close to the vest. you knew DJ Wagner, you knew Aaron Bradshaw, and then it was kind of like, well, who else? Like, who else are they going after? The Wagner thing, I think, it's fascinating for a number of reasons. He's almost become. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a fantastic player. He'll help out UK or U of L significantly, whichever school he goes to. But he's almost become more of like it's like a symbolic recruitment. Like if you're Louisville, you beat out Calipari, who seemed to have this like he was a UK lock until you hired Kenny Payne, until you got Milt Wagner on board, until you got all these guys and all this momentum, and now it's a sign. So it's a shot across the bow saying like we're here. It may take us a while to get back to national prominence, but you're going to be hearing from us. Like the days of the domination, both on the court and the recruiting trail, they're a thing of the past. And if you don't get him, I definitely think that there's, especially because there was that brief period like a month and a half ago where everybody was crystal balling DJ Wagner to Louisville, and I think every Louisville fan got their hopes up. I think it stings a little bit more than maybe you thought it would when Kenny Payne was initially hired. There also will be people who said, if you couldn't get DJ Wagner, what are we doing here? Like this was supposed to be a done deal. Like, why are we hiring Kenny Payne? Why are we bringing Milt Wagner into the fold? Like that will be out there a little bit as well. And I think the only way for Payne to kind of mitigate those concerns and to alleviate those fears is to kill it with the rest of the 2023 class. If you're able to land a kid like AJ Johnson, who's now skyrocketing across rankings after his gigantic summer, and who apparently is planning to come in for Louisville Live, I think that will temper those fears. If you're able to get, I don't know, some of these other kids that they've offered post Peach Jam that are high 4-star caliber players, I think that will also calm down Louisville fans. And I hate to put a bar on something like this, but it certainly feels like it needs to be a top 10 caliber class for Louisville fans to be on board, because that was the promise. I mean, you're bringing, Louisville is I think in most rankings, I would put them as like the 6th best program in the history of college basketball. Regardless of where you have them in your particular rankings, it's a program that typically is going to hire the best of the best when they have a head coaching vacancy. And you brought in a guy in Kenny Payne who, despite coaching at a high level across the board for a number of years, had never coached a game as a head coach. When that's the case, there has to be some other skill set that kind of balances that out. There has to be something else that he's bringing to the table. And with Payne, it was, he's going to get you guys. That was, everybody said it. Like, he's going to get you guys. He's going to get you guys. And if he's not getting you guys in year one with a full recruiting cycle, I think then you start to panic a little bit. And it's not just the DJ Wagner thing, it's across the board. So I think that unless he just kills it in year one and overachieves to a massive extent, the recruiting class has to be very, very, very good. I feel confident about some of the kids that they're in on. But if it starts looking like, the recruiting classes that Louisville's had in the past, sometimes when they've had more experienced head coaches and they've been given more leeway, then I think fans are going to, I don't want to use the word panic, but that's probably the case. They're going to start panicking a little bit.
I'm really fascinated to see, after watching the Chris Mack evolution of the first year team, everyone had no expectations for. They surprised people for a while, kind of fell apart down the stretch, but they still had done enough when they were surprising people to be a tournament team against expectations. And then you had the big recruiting class. At least on paper at the time, it was a big recruiting class, and he had everything going for him out of that first season, even with the way things ended. And this could be a little bit of a different juxtaposition, where it's maybe the season doesn't go great. Maybe the season meets those expectations as being kind of a borderline team. And then they turn things up in recruiting. Then it's kind of a more anticipatory, like, get excited for the future type thing. And I feel like that, if we had to poll people, would probably be the leader. It wouldn't be the majority of the vote, but it would probably be the plurality of the vote would say, maybe don't expect a whole lot this first year. But if you get some combination of Wagner, Bradshaw, Johnson, Curtis Williams, some of these other guys who are on Louisville's wish list, yeah, that's a pretty good class. You've already got Caleb Glenn in the fold, which is an exciting addition already, and a really good player. But yeah, the expectation and the hope is really, and that's what recruiting is all about. But it's also really high right now. Is Wagner's probably the only one that would really hurt, right? Would Bradshaw hurt at this point?
At this point, no, because he's been considered a UK lean for so long. And I think also, you don't know exactly how it's going to work out with the current roster, but you expect to bring back I mean, at least a couple of those front court players from this year's team. That should help. The guard situation is the guard situation. Like you're going to need guards again next year. There's no doubt about it. So I think losing Wagner would hurt more. And just for like the reasons we mentioned earlier, if you lost him to like the G League or you lost him to a different school, it'd be one thing. But losing him to Kentucky after you felt like you had that period of time where, he was yours. Everybody was saying he was yours. That's going to sting the most. I think that fans will be upset about that. But if he can balance that out with some combination of, like you said, he's got Caleb Glenn, who I think will go up in the rankings after his season at La Lumiere this season. If you can get Curtis Williams, if you can land AJ Johnson, who's about to skyrocket, and then maybe a fourth player who's like a top 50, top 60 caliber player, I think that's a class that fans can sell themselves on. It may not be what they were hoping for in year one, but it'll also help if he's, seems to be making inroads with the 2024 class, which it seems like he's doing right now. If Louisville fans feel like they're in a good position with that class, it'll make it easier to take losing Wagner and then maybe only having like a top 15, bottom end of the top 10, top class. But he's got to get some combination of those kids. If he swings and misses on more of these kids and the team is not great this year, then I think people start to get a little bit antsy. Yeah.
AJ Johnson is like number 40 in the composite rankings and was included in Travis Branham's list of guys who could be the number one prospects in 2023 with is it GG Jackson?
Now he's 2022. He's playing
right.
For South Carolina
but now that he's reclassified, the debate is on, is DJ Wagner still the number one kid? Well, it'll all shake out. We're in the very perfect time to have this podcast and speculate about it, because this is right around when people are going to start setting their visits, settling on schools, cutting their lists. And then the hoopla is going to just be insane once we start hearing where they're going, when they're visiting, who else they're visiting, which school is lurking. If another school is made in grounds, it is really bad outside.
I know.
So last thing then, Mike, and then we'll have to go probably calm some nerves in our households. The IARP. Do you have where do you land on the spectrum of just like your general feelings towards how this thing is going to shake out?
I'm an IARP conspiracy theorist. I don't think it actually exists. I think that it's a global cabal that
oh my God. In the basement of a pizza parlor. You got to be careful here. Got to be careful.
What have they actually been doing all this time? They get 6 cases. They're like, whoa, we didn't expect to have this many. We're not taking any new cases now. It's going to take us 5 years to get through all this stuff. I mean, who knows? Like if it follows everybody's just kind of assuming at this point that it's going to follow along with the NC State ruling, where they said our intention is not to punish kids and programs and players and teams and coaches and stuff who had nothing to do with the transgressions that took place. And Mark Emmert kind of reiterated that in his statement following that up. If you believe that to be the case, then you're not going to see many postseason bans here. You may see some, like I can see in Kansas's case, like Bill Self getting a year suspension, or there's talk about he getting like a postseason suspension or something like that. But for Louisville, I think you have to expect scholarship reduction of some sort, financial penalty, and probation. I don't think they'll have to, they won't have to take any games or anything like that, because Brian Bowen never played in any game, and he's the only player that would be technically ineligible in all this. But the postseason ban's the big deal. And I've always just kind of said, if you're a Louisville fan who wants to believe we're not going to get a postseason ban because it's the right thing to do, and the weight has been the punishment enough, that's fine. I've kind of sided on, I'm expecting a postseason ban just because it's the NCAA. Why would we expect anything different based on the past time? It does feel like there's a glimmer of hope now with these new rulings. I'm still not holding out much hope. My only hope is that if it is a postseason ban, they get this ruling out like in September or October, because worst case scenario for Louisville is, let's say the season starts in November. The team looks like worst case fears are being realized. The team does not look like a competitor. It looks like this is going to be another just around 500 type season. And then the IRP comes out in mid-November and says, you're also banned from the 2024 NCAA tournament. It just, that kills recruiting. You have basically a 1.5 year wait 2-year wait pretty much to be excited about anything. That's that's doomsday scenario. I can't imagine that that's going to happen. Hopefully the timeline will follow the NC State one and we'll get some sort of ruling by October. But my God, I mean, who the hell knows, Jeff? At this point, who the hell knows?
Well, all I can, every time I hear Brian Bowen's name, I think of all of the key moments in my life that something to do with that dude interrupted, between my proposal to my now wife to, the time I think it was a Star Wars, one of the new Star Wars. I was trying to watch a movie in Tallahassee and the dude enrolled at South Carolina and we weren't sure if it happened. All this crap for a guy who never even played for Louisville. So yeah, it's we've come a long way from from where this thing started to where we are now, and it's crazy that it's still going. I keep mentioning this. I know that people roll their eyes or just get annoyed because I repeat myself a lot, but I do think that the NCAA changing the language in their constitution to basically say divisions and conferences should not be doing postseason bans as punishment anymore. I feel like if the IARP operates in the way that practically the way we thought they would theoretically, and that is really trying to adhere very strictly to the policy side of things while adjudicating things in a little bit of a different way from the old infractions process, that they'll follow that and that they will recognize that this isn't what the NCAA wants out of these cases. And there may be punishment, but that will not be included. That I find myself convincing myself, not that I care. I mean, it is what it is, but like, I found myself just continuously thinking back on that and feeling like that is what Louisville fans should be hopeful about. But again, I totally understand why they have no trust whatsoever in this process. Well, Mike, I got to tell you, you mentioned the year 2024. And when I was a kid, I thought by 2024, I would be the youngest presidential candidate in the history of the United States, and I would be well on my way as a United States Senator. And instead, I am talking about the IARP for a 5-year-old case with you in our collective basements on Zoom. So here we are, living the dream, my friend. Thank you for joining me on my podcast.
Things were supposed to be different.
It was supposed to be so different.
You mutter to yourself every night. Things were supposed to be different. It's okay. No complaints.
As I binge watch Girls on HBO.
You got a cute kid, though. That's all that matters.
Got a cute kid. So do you, my friend. You got a couple of them.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. It's good to see you. Good to chat about hoops as always. I'm asking you now, just send it to me in a text before you put it. I know you'll probably put it on Card Chronicle at some point. I got to see your list of 15 in the ACC. I want to see the rankings. I'd be very intrigued. I should have asked before I did the Lindy's.
Yeah, we can make that happen, though. We got plenty of time. We'll do
plenty of time. Love it. All right. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you.
Thanks, man.